All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming to what would be the May chapter meeting, but due to rescheduling is now the May chapter meeting in June to make it extra confusing. I will confirm it is June. I've reminded myself several times for the past 2 days. Uh, we're looking forward to talking to you about tech, comm, and mental health, caring for yourself and your documentation. My name is Bethany Aguad, and I'm excited to be doing this presentation with Nick Ducharme.
Hello, great to be here. Look forward to talking with you all about mental health and TechCom.
It's a com. So just want to make sure you get a welcome from the SEC Florida chapter. I think everyone who is here is familiar with the chapter, so I'm not going to give you the full sales pitch, but just a reminder that we are a chapter of the Society for Technical Communication. This is our last, I think, program of the chapter year before we are going to have our end of year celebration. I would like to be confusing to have end of year in June, but that is the year that our our events run. So we'll be doing some awards and recognitions then, and also electing our chapter officers. I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again that we are looking for leaders for the chapter. If you are interested in building your experience, something to put on your resume, and giving back and being part of our administrative council, we are looking for a secretary and director at large. To give you a more of a pitch, you'd get to spend time with me and WC and Julia, who are also running for chapter leadership positions. I'm running for president, Julia for vice president, and WC for treasurer. Now, we're all planning currently going to be running unopposed, but someone could always stage a coup. I'm always open to that if it comes along. But for now, we're looking for people to join. So if you would at all be interested, please do let me know. We have some details about the positions that were published in Memo to Members that I've included a link to there. And would be excited if you're interested in participating further. So let me know. I also want to mention we're going to have our leadership retreat in July. Historically, we have had an event on campus, and I have provided donuts. And alas, another donutless year is ahead of us. We'll be holding that online again. poor, poor John has missed out on so many events where he should have been fed. You joined the chapter just pre-COVID. um, but that is where we do our annual planning for the chapter, talking about what we're going to do for events and any sort of programs, and also just what are our goals and things we want to review and revise. So always excited to have that event. We try to do some fun stuff as well. So that would be on Zoom. So even if you do not want to be a chapter leader right now, you are welcome to attend that. So we'll send out an email, and if you're interested, just respond and let me know, and we'll make sure you get an invite. Okay, so a little bit about our agenda. We just did our networking, 6:30 to 7. Thank you everyone who joined and listened to me talk about my grandmother's love of spiders, John's hatred of spiders or fear of spiders, and also a little bit about John's experience at the STC Summit. Enjoyed the chance to chit chat with everybody. Just mentioning, I know Yash said he's looking for a job. So if anyone knows of any opportunities, always feel free to pass them along because we're happy to help people make those connections and find their next place to work. So just thought I'd mention that there. We're going to be starting the program now. So Nick and I are going to be running through some slides on tech, comm, and mental health. We broke it down to 3 parts: about mental health, caring for yourself and your documentation, and then closing thoughts. Feel free to use the chat along the way. We're not planning to answer questions until the end, but if you put questions in there, we will make sure to grab those and respond to them. And also, feel free to share if there's something you want to pass on to the group or something you want to elaborate on. We're always happy to see you guys interact with each other in the chat as well. Sorry, give myself a moment to breathe because I'm a fast talker. I did want to mention just a quick content warning. We will be using terms for different mental illnesses and talking a bit about their impacts. There will be some mentions of self-harm, but we're not describing anything specific or any scenarios. So I don't think it should be anything too alarming, but did just want to let you guys know. For the terms we use, we will be defining them as much as possible. And we're going to be speaking primarily from personal experience and best practices we've learned, both for our own mental health and for things we've learned on the job. But we just want to have a reminder that we are not here to diagnose other people. We are just here to share what we know. So without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. Part 1, about mental health. So we're doing our best to be sensitive to different experiences during this presentation. We will be sharing our perspectives on mental health and best practices based on those experiences. We hope that nothing we say will be upsetting to any attendees, but we also wanted to provide a reminder that we will be discussing mental health candidly. So it helps to start with a definition of mental health, I think, and this one is from the World Health Organization. Mental health is a state of well being in which an individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to their community. Um, we're not restricting our definition of mental health. We do want people to be able to think about this topic broadly and this term broadly. Similarly, we do have a definition for mental illness as defined by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, who we'll be talking about periodically throughout the presentation. Mental illness is defined as a mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, behavior, or mood. These conditions deeply impact day-to-day living and may also affect the ability to relate to others. If you have or think you might have a mental illness, the first thing you must know is that you are not alone. We wanted to also mention that mental health conditions are far more common than one might think, mainly because people don't like to or maybe are even scared to talk about them. Part of our goal tonight is to normalize having discussions about mental health conditions.
All right. So we wanted to talk a little about our own personal experiences, kind of just our journeys with mental health. Nick and I have some things that we have experienced that are similar and some that are different. Uh, One thing that is in common, we both experience obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. Our journey to arriving at a, an OCD diagnosis was very different. My mom was a preschool teacher when I was very young, so she had a lot of experience identifying any sort of developmental issues or abnormal behaviors with kids. So when I was 2, she realized that I had a lot of things that were very distressing for me as a small child, like anything that was outside of the routine, anything that didn't follow order or patterns, anything that seemed to break with the structure I expected my life, I found very, very distressing. So I got diagnosed extremely young because my mom advocated for me to actually get that diagnosis and then develop various different, primarily behavioral coping mechanisms and cognitive methods to be able to handle the difficulties that come with having OCD as I got older. So in many ways, I'm very lucky to have received that diagnosis very early and worked with that throughout my life. Nick has had a very different journey to his diagnosis.
Yes, my diagnosis was far more recent. Last year, actually, I want to say probably in March of last year. Um, I was under extra stress between my work environment and COVID, which played into the work environment as well, and started to notice that I seemed to be exhibiting symptoms of what I understood OCD to be at the time, which my understanding of that topic is now much more broad than it used to be. But it surprised me to learn that it was my primary diagnosis. And for a time, there was some depression, but I would say probably that I would not be diagnosed with that today, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful also for the treatment that I've been receiving over the past year between mental health counseling and prescriptions and some workbook work and a little mindfulness meditation too from time to time.
Yeah, it's actually been really good for us developing this presentation because it's driven Nick and I to share more with each other than we would have previously. I would say I was not comfortable sharing much about my mental health experiences for a good part of my life, even though I felt very confident in how I was dealing with them at most points. I did definitely experience the stigma of not wanting to be seen as having any sort of additional, I guess, obstacles in the path of work or school and that sort of thing. So I'm grateful to have Nick also encouraging me to share more about what it's been like. For me, I know OCD is often sort of, I think, distilled into a few traits that people expect based on what we see primarily in movies and TV shows for characters who have a love of order and are perfectionists, and often this can even be seen as like a special ability that makes you really good at like solving crime
Oh,
and
monk.
yeah, and stuff like that. And I don't want to say there's not any sort of upsides to being, you know, keenly aware of details, but I think often those fail to capture a lot of the really distressing experiences that come from dealing with intrusive thoughts and compulsions that are things that are happening in your head but seem to come from outside of yourself, and when you're not doing well are extremely difficult to control or respond to, and can drive you to do things that you don't really want to do but you feel like you need to be able to move forward. So that's something I think Nick and I both talked about with each other.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, with every individual it manifests a little bit differently,
Hmm.
but that there are some common threads that, helps one feel not as alone, to know other people out there experience similar things.
Yeah. And for Nick and I, we both have talked a lot about how we feel very responsible for the safety and well being of absolutely everyone around us at all times. Um, and how that often leads to having thoughts that and compulsions that are not based in our rational concerns about the world, which there are many things in the world to be concerned about, especially with regards to our safety and well being, but things that are unlikely to happen or not our responsibility. um my main struggles for a long time were regarding like not making sure I hadn't left doors open or windows open or oven on or anything that could be dangerous in my house or my home, and feeling very responsible for anything that might possibly go wrong, and thinking if I can anticipate every single outcome ever and plan and prepare for all of those things, then nothing will ever go wrong, except it just means that you're constantly reinforcing those thoughts by trying to resolve them with behavior instead of working at getting at the actual cause. And Nick has some experiences as well.
Yeah, my more quote unquote classic instances of OCD were probably with light switches, being afraid that my hand might have been slightly wet. So then I turn it on and off a few times to make sure I didn't cause some kind of electrical issue that someone else might come along and experience. Let's see, checking. I used to, before I got treatment, check locks multiple times, lock and lock again, kind of thing. But for me, I would say the worst has been the intrusive thoughts, the self-questioning, self-judgment, just kind of endless thought loops that are really hard to break out of, and ultimately some exposure therapy to accept that the thoughts happen rather than fight against them has been helpful.
Yeah. And even I think it was just working on this presentation, we were both talking about trichotillomania that we both suffer from, which is pulling your hair out, which is just one of those things that often goes with a lot of other conditions like anxiety and OCD, where you don't, it's not something you want to do. No one desires to do that, but it is just a compulsion that can be overwhelming sometimes, and that we both have struggled through that at points in our lives. So,
Yeah. And even that manifests differently for different people. For me, it's usually just, oh, there's an arm hair out of place, pluck, and
mhm.
that's done.
And I've said, and it's why I wear my hair in a ponytail. So it is out and away from my face. So I'm not looking at it, thinking about it, being distracted by it as much as possible. So I guess there's no like end necessarily to some of these things. I'm not going to be like, and then we were cured. It's more just sharing that, this is something we go through and learn to adapt to, and are grateful for the people in our lives who support us and help us and understand when we don't necessarily always have the best days. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, same here.
So I think we'll move on to talking about some statistics.
Okay, so we did want to mention, in the US, according to NAMI, 1 in 5 people do experience mental illness. So that kind of goes back to how we said, it's more common than some might think. Um, there is also a statistic here that talks about quote unquote serious mental illness. We do want to mention, all mental illnesses are valid, not just the serious ones. We Serious mental illness is in this case defined as someone who, having a diagnosable mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder that causes serious functional impairment that substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. So 1 in 20 people in the USA experience that. 45% of adults with mental illness get treatment in a year, which is lower than one might hope.
Mhm.
But and also 11 years is the average delay between onset and treatment, which, Bethany's was pretty immediate. Mine was decades later. So I guess we about average out to somewhere around that.
Yeah, splitting the difference there. We did want to make sure to talk a little bit about the effects of the pandemic. We know this is certainly not an exhaustive list of all the effects of the pandemic on everyone's mental health. I think we're not going to know for a long time everything that leads to. But a study from the World Health Organization said the pandemic triggered a 25% increase in anxiety and depression. I know from a lot of people who might not have struggled with mental health in other parts of their lives, the pandemic has brought a lot of challenges for many people as our work and our lives and our our hopes for the future have changed. Another thing we wanted to highlight from that study is that beyond COVID itself, economic hardship has driven poor mental health for a lot of people. It's hard to feel good about yourself and the world and in a good headspace when you're concerned about your food and your housing and other life necessities and things like healthcare. It also has been clear that the pandemic has widened the mental health treatment gap, so that onset versus treatment is changing, and there's an even greater increase, or rather, I guess I'll say an increase in how many people are experiencing mental health conditions but are not necessarily receiving treatment. Um, and this study from the World Health Organization also found that 90% of countries surveyed included mental health and psychosocial support in their COVID-19 response plans, because even early in this, I think it was clear that this was going to be a significant mental toll on everyone on the planet. So that's still something. I don't think we have any solutions that are quick answers for what's going to happen, but just wanted to highlight that it is, a very real, pressing experience that everyone's going through. Now, Scott Abel, who's the content wrangler, did do a technical documentation survey last year, particularly focused on changes for technical communicators since the pandemic started. One of those is that Zoom fatigue was really prevalent, especially last year, which is especially for people who had to do video calls for work. Being on video call after video call after video call can be extremely emotionally and mentally exhausting. Nick and I talked about this, that as people who have a tendency to try to check how we're doing and are looking for feedback, having constant visual feedback of your own face and how you're interacting with people, it can be very challenging.
Yeah, like how are my mannerisms? How are my expressions? Is my hair like not done well? Just constant feedback loop there. So I consider it fortunate that we happen to be in a workplace where we don't have to be on camera too often.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very rarely. I'm grateful for having the technology of Zoom. I say as we are on a Zoom, and I'm very glad I've gotten to see people and have that opportunity when we would not otherwise, but it has been challenging for some. Just a few things about TechCom. We are lucky. Our profession was not negatively affected by the pandemic. Many other, uh, you know, careers, like people who are working in restaurants, people working in healthcare, have had major changes. For us, there's still lots of job opportunities. It sometimes takes time to find the right exact job and place and everything, but there are jobs out there. Especially with the next item, remote work and work from home becoming pretty much the norm for technical communicators. I was someone who was working remotely before the pandemic, which in some ways I said I was lucky. I got to prepare, I got to set up an office, whereas other people had to go straight from, working in an office to working from their kitchen table. But that's, I think, something that's not going to be going away anytime soon. The last thing is that it's increasingly common for people to work on distributed teams. So when people have been hiring since the pandemic started, they've been hiring people who don't work necessarily anywhere near a physical office and have no intention of them ever going into a workplace. And on the team Nick and I work on, because we work together now, our team is working in multiple different states in the US and different time zones. And most of us have never met in person. I have met Nick before. We do know each other in real life. But for many other people, we're just going to be a fully remote team.
All right, moving on to part two. of three. Part two is caring for yourself and your documentation. Remote work. We wanted to segue into remote work because there's a lot of nuance that comes with it. Um, so we just wanted to talk about remote work and how to make remote work for you, if indeed it's the right fit for you, which not everyone finds that remote work is good for them and their mental health. And part of it is knowing your personality. In general, introverts probably have an easier time with remote work than extroverts do, just because you don't have as naturally that, standard office banter. But if you if you do end up working remote, as we do, one thing I would say is to cherish the value of not having a daily office commute. Um, it's been so nice just being able to wake up, start my day, not have to drive anywhere, not just for gas price reasons, but also just for time and mental energy. Um, Building and maintaining strong work relationships while remote is key. I mentioned the lack of ability to just, walk in, peek into someone's cubicle, say good morning, ask them about how they're doing. Oh, hey, that donut looks great, that kind of thing. Um, okay, clearly I just want donuts now because we were talking about donuts earlier.
Yeah.
Um, um, but it's worth some extra effort to feel connected. I am in your coworkers sometimes, or setting up some kind of maybe monthly or twice a month call with your teammates, just to kind of just shoot the breeze.
Mhm.
Um, Keeping clear boundaries between your work life and personal life is important as well. I don't have the ability to do this right now, but my house is being built. So someday, later this year, I will be able to actually set my office space apart from my personal spaces, which just really helps it feel like when I leave work, I truly leave work. Because, you need to be able to shut work out of your mind when you turn off your work computer, just as you would when you're leaving a physical office space. That temptation to check email at 9 at night or something is more real if you have your uh, work computer there with you constantly. It almost feels like you're back in school and homework's constantly looming over you, which I was very glad to not have that anymore when I joined the workforce. So I don't want to go back to it. We also want to talk about taking care of your relationships. Um, as for taking
Oh,
care of yourself,
I think we missed a slide. Sorry. Just gotta
did I?
yeah,
Oh,
advocate for yourself on a virtual team. We
ah,
are gonna talk about your relationships.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
Um, yeah, so advocating for yourself on a virtual team. Um, One should think about how they communicate with others. Ultimately, just try and be intentional. Consider what to communicate, when and how, the method you do so, and the frequency of communication. And consider the medium in which you're communicating. Certain things are better for certain types of correspondence, like IM for something quick, voice chat for a full conversation, email for, if you have several paragraphs of content to get across to someone, or for something more official, and share actively. Ultimately, we don't want to be silos. We want to avoid hoarding or withholding information or knowledge. We want to be able to share that with our teammates and cross functionally as well. And also not to wait to be asked a question. Bethany, I think you had
Yeah, I
something
could share this. So this
yeah.
is something Nick does really well. So on the team we work on, Nick is a tech writer. I have a yet to be redefined job title, where I publish documentation, but we work on different product lines. So often what's happening on Nick's product line is not necessarily shared more broadly and will eventually affect me as someone who needs to publish his work. And I'm really grateful when Nick will say, hey, we just got a heads up about the major changes coming through for the product, and it looks like they're moving up the timeline. So I'm going to be producing documentation much faster than I originally thought. And it's partly good for sharing because I like to know how Nick is doing as my teammate, but it also is helpful for me to have some insight into what's happening on a product that I don't work directly on all the time. So normally I would have be like, oh, I need to ask Nick and check in. Hey, I haven't heard anything about what's going on with your product or your documentation. Any updates? But Nick's always really good about just proactively sharing when he has news. which is great for keeping me in the loop and also making me just generally aware of what he's doing. And I try to do the same for him. But Nick's product also gets a lot more changes, so he has more news than I do generally.
But I would say you're really good at sharing news about the kind of administrative stuff you're doing for the team, like keeping our Madcap Flare tool up to date and doing a bunch of process improvements on that and how they can make our lives easier. So thank you for leading the charge on that and communicating effectively.
Yeah, always happy to share. We also we use Teams for work. I have positive and negative things to say about Teams. When it works, I like it. When it doesn't work, I'm frustrated by it. That's my short version about what I think about Teams. But it is overall a nice option to have different chat threads where we can send quick bits of information that doesn't need to be as formal as an email. And I think that encourages all of us just to, every so often fire something off just to share with the team.
Okay. Oh yeah, and also, yeah, let others know what you're doing or working on. I think we've touched on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Taking care of your relationships.
Yes. I think this is me, right?
So it is.
I
Wow,
mean,
I really got mixed up.
that's okay. You really want to talk about relationships? Always feel free to chime in. Okay, so for me and taking care of my own mental health, being surrounded with people that I know care about me and I trust is really important. I know when I was young, and I think it's true for many people, your friends are the people that are in proximity to you. You don't have a lot of discernment and option when you are like a small child and making friends. But as you get older, I think it's really important to invest in relationships with people who are aligned with you on values and ideals and who are going to take the time to care about how you and how you're doing and when you can do the same for them. So intentionally engaging with people who you can trust and building those relationships by sharing what you're going through and taking the time to be there for them as well is really really important. I'm really grateful for a lot of wonderful people here in our chapter who have been very kind to me through many different years of different challenges and struggles, and I know I can rely on and trust, and I hope you feel the same way. So I think that's important for staying connected. um, and just in general, I know I'm trying to get better about sharing more about what I'm going through sometimes with my mental health, but I'm always happy to support other people if you have anything you want to share. So, whether that's immediately with a spouse or close family member or with friends and peers, I hope it's something we can all become more comfortable with over time, because I think having that network of people who are there for you and where you're not as afraid of any failures or mistakes or slip ups as you're on your journey, especially with the pandemic not ending anytime soon. I think it's important to extend a lot of compassion to ourselves and each other.
Yeah, definitely. And this also feels freeing to be able to talk about our experiences with people we've known and also people that we're meeting the first time in the chapter. And one thing I did forget to mention on the slot on our experiences slide too is that next month, or I guess this month now, I
Mhm.
have a neuropsych evaluation appointment to see if possibly I might also be on the autism spectrum. So diagnoses sometimes are also a continuing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to connecting with people, uh, we want to encourage you to connect with your team, not just about the work, but what's going on in your lives. I'm really grateful for the team I work on. I'm not just saying that because Nick is here and he's my teammate. I have an awesome team. It's part of the reason I pitched the job to Nick at all last year when I knew he was looking, was that it's a great team. Everyone's hardworking, supportive, empathetic, and has a sense of humor. But in the first few years on the job, I definitely didn't nurture those relationships much beyond work colleagues who talk about work and trust each other to get work done. And I feel like that was a missed opportunity where I could have been developing deeper relationships. I'm not saying everyone you work with needs to be your friend, but taking the time to know, how everyone's family is doing and to be responsive to when they're going through something. Like one of our colleagues has COVID right now, and just trying to be more sensitive to the human element and not treat each other necessarily all as just like co-worker slash resource person that we don't know very well. It also means that you have someone you can confide in who you trust whenever you need help, not necessarily always mental health help, but sometimes help with your work or support or to lend an ear. And it's hard to just share sensitive information or perspectives if you don't have an established relationship with someone and know that they can be trusted and are comfortable hearing that kind of information. So the reason that we want that is not just for your own mental health and well-being, but because your work is going to be better. I would think I've done my best work when I've been on a good team where I feel supported and successful and have opportunities to collaborate. So developing those relationships is important for a multitude of reasons. Um, we did want to mention, especially to reach out to your teammates and your SMEs to check in and offer help. I think Nick and I have done a few presentations. We've talked about making friends with your SMEs, your subject matter experts at work, the people you go to for content and information. I know not everyone necessarily has the same opportunities at every job to do this, but when you can, it means a lot to people if you can take a few minutes just to check in and see if there's something you can assist them with, or if you know that there's something you could help, like, hey, I know you're working on that document. Would you like someone to give it a review? Sometimes just those little offers mean a lot and help build those relationships so that you can, work together better in the future and be a more supportive team member.
It also just brightens your day to have positive interactions with SMEs. Like it's just a little burst of sunshine in what might be even a bad day sometimes.
Yeah. And also to look for opportunities to befriend people in other departments. Not just because you get all the good gossip, which has been one of my jokes for years that I think is also kind of true, but because it gives you opportunity to collaborate on different things you wouldn't have a chance to. There's a lot of work our team has done by working closely with people in development who we naturally consume some of their, work products, but without intentionally having conversations with them about pain points they're experiencing in their process that also are ones we're experiencing, we would miss these chances to solve problems that they're also trying to solve because we're all trying to accomplish a lot of the same things. So reaching out to people and sharing struggles at work, and if there's something wrong where you're like, well, we're wasting a lot of time on this part of the process. Why are we doing this? Is it valuable? Is it useful? Could there be something better? Should we pursue a new tool? The biggest one is our team was onboarding Madcap authoring management system last year for development, as well as our team. We'd been using Madcap Flare before, but we got that up and running last year. So that was only because we'd built relationships with people who were working in development in past years so that they were ready to take on a bigger endeavor with us. So some of this is my advice on being a good team member. I did also want to mention some of these ideas come from our presentation Todd DeLuca did for our chapter a few years back about being a good remote team member, back before everyone was a remote team member. But I want to talk a little bit about trusting your team members. So I know if I reach out to Nick and I ask him for something, he's going to give me his honest, sincere opinion on something I'm asking him, or give me thoughtful, intentional feedback when asked. Um, so having those personal relationships is important and helpful. I also been joking. I'm trying to get to where Lockheed was. We have a whole bunch of STC people at Lockheed. I've now got a few people who've come from STC who are on my team in my small company. Not mine that I own it, mine that I work there. But it's great to see, people who I've built relationships with here in STC and before that FTC get to be my coworkers now. So we already have those strong relationships even before we started working together. It's also good when we work towards the same goals. This happens a lot with our team at work. Beyond get the work done and publish the doc, I think we have a shared vision on what we would like to see our team do, what sort of work we think is valuable, what we can bring to different conversations with our perspective on content. And I think that helps keep us all as energized and focused as we can be, even when, deadlines loom and there's a lot of pressure. Having some things to look forward to that we're all pursuing is important. Also, I'm here to bring up questions and issues quickly. I would say this was something I struggled with earliest on the job, where I would stubbornly try to fix things myself or solve problems instead of just asking for help. In the end, I eventually realized when you're asking someone a careful, intentional question, very few people are going to be offended by that. I like helping people when they ask me for help. I feel like in the end, I've helped them. They have a better answer, and it's only, something that has helped both of us.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience, maybe for a different reason, of feeling insecure asking for help when I was too new, wanting to seem self-sufficient. But being able to help each other makes the workplace more efficient and more enjoyable.
Yeah, the win-win. I'm not Dan Voss, so it can't be a win-win-win-win. For those who know Dan's ability to pitch anything in a document. But yeah, just opportunities to follow up with people, and again, the trust is really important. We did also want to mention supporting different perspectives. I am grateful that we are not, as much as I said, a team that has a similar perspective on what we could do. We are not a hive mind. We are not a monolith. We do not all agree on everything. In fact, the things we disagree on most are the smallest things, the little grammar rules that we don't necessarily all agree on. But we all get a chance to share our ideas and give feedback and explain our reasoning, and give each other critiques. I know Nick has been great working with me and one of the other writers on trying to develop better standards for some of our procedure writing, because for a while we had one product and it was done one way, and now we have like 4 products that we support, and they all have different expectations for documentation.
Yeah, and just fun little style guide discussions about word choice too, like do we use input or enter?
Oh yeah, yeah. Nick was like, "Oh no, I've been using input. It must be enter now. A decision has been made." um, I'm grateful that we're a team that, even though we have different levels of experience, overall everyone's seen as valid, and we all get to participate in making decisions about what we're going to do as much as possible. And then in the end, even if some of us disagree on the smaller points, we all will work together to have a shared perspective. So, managing conflict. We focused on all the good slides first. We're talking about building trust, having relationships that are positive. This will not always happen. You will sometimes have conflict. For yourself in your personal life, Nick and I have had lots of discussions about conflict, because I think we find each other's viewpoint valuable, because we are basically at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to our impulse for resolving conflict.
Yeah, starting my career, I used to be extremely conflict averse, but now I can see the point of healthy constructive conflict, and I still have a really gentle approach to it,
Mhm.
but I'm more willing to engage in that now.
Yeah. And I won't name names of people I see here on the call, but I know there's some other folks like myself who can be very assertive and direct about conflict. Here's what I think. Here's where I stand. Explain to me why you don't agree with me. Let's talk it through in a very direct fashion. um, so sometimes I think there's value in taking a step back and to consider the repercussions to escalating combat. I say add this partly from my own experience, because my instinct would always be, yes, I will escalate every conflict. I will make sure that everyone's getting a chance to share their entire perspective, and not everything needs to necessarily be contentious
By the
all
way,
the time.
conflict, not combat.
Oh, did I say combat?
we're I
I
think
have
we've been
I'm not,
talking about video games recently.
oh
Probably
yeah.
that's why.
Sorry, I have not physically fought anyone. Let me clarify that. I only use my words. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome. Just wanted to give you a chance to clarify that, because I
Nope.
know you and you don't. So
No. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I did want to say, one of, I think, our greatest opportunities as people whose special skill is communication, we have a great opportunity to articulate our perspective when it comes to conflict. So when it comes to any issue that we're resolving with people, you guys are so funny in the chat. um, when it comes to our perspective, a lot of times we are able to articulate where we're coming from, and I think that's something that we should lean on and rely on. Not necessarily in the moment having all the right words, but sometimes just being able to put down what our thoughts are if it's something significant. And for smaller conflicts, just being able to make sure you're hearing people out, because communication is a two-way street. It's not just about winning arguments or combat.
yeah, and truly, most conflicts. Now I'm having to check myself.
Yeah.
Not to use the wrong word accidentally. Most conflicts, don't have to be dramatic like they're on a reality TV show. That's not what conflict is. Conflict doesn't have to be, a heated argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, the thing I remind myself is that I cannot manage others' emotions for them. I can only manage my response to them. So it's important for me to take a step back sometimes and just be mindful. We'll have some talk a little bit about mindfulness, I think, in other parts of the presentation. When it comes to your documentation, see the value of conflict, even if it's, something very, very small. Our team does not have a lot of conflict on large issues, but we have plenty of disagreements on small issues. I put on here who hasn't debated a comma or a hyphen or something like that. And that's because we're all invested in what we do and we have different perspectives. And I think there's value in that. I wouldn't want to be on a team with 5 Bethanies who all had the exact same perspective and thought the same answer at all times. You don't want a second opinion if it's the same opinion twice. WC M dashes. I think we've seen some of the most intense chapter conflict over M dashes. I think it got personal sometimes. I don't recommend getting personal over an M dash, but I think we Oxford comma fights. Yeah. We all do care intensely about what we do. And I think there's always an opportunity to see that as a positive force where it's going to drive us to make better decisions and to actually think about what we're doing and not just go with what feels comfortable or, well, we've always done it this way. So I'm happy to work with people who are willing to be direct about what they think about what we're doing. And that's the positive side of conflict. We know sometimes there's conflict that is not positive, that escalates, that's not just a single limited discussion on a single issue, but can impact your work or have any sort of negative implications beyond a single conversation. And I think Nick and I both experienced this in different ways. I did say one of my colleagues at work, not directly on my team, but on another team, I called her my nemesis privately, just to clarify, because we were at odds on everything. We just had a completely different perspective on process. I felt like things should constantly be reevaluated and optimized, and she felt like if if it ain't broke, don't fix it perspective. So whenever I was making changes, she felt that that was a direct attack on her perspective on what we were doing. And a lot of that was resolved through me just being really clear about what I was trying to do and eventually building up more trust through compromise with her. So accepting that necessarily we didn't have to solve every problem right away and we could do things iteratively and work on improvements. But throughout that time where we were having some conflict, I did make sure I kept records of what was going on. I shared that with my manager because I did not want to have anything that would negatively impact my work or other teammates or anything like that. So make sure you know what resources are available to you if you do have conflict. For a lot of big companies, you have human resources. I feel like I have to say, human resources is there to protect the company, not you. But that does mean that it is in their best interest to resolve conflict between employees because it is not beneficial to anyone. So if there is anything significant that comes up, you can take it to HR, or for some companies, they might have an ethics hotline if it rises to that level. But for smaller things, hopefully you have a manager who you can trust that you can take it to. If you don't, there's can also be your close colleagues, or for people who are not in the workplace yet, your mentor is a great person to go to share anything you're going through, either when you're new on the job or anything like that, that you might want a sounding board, or sometimes just someone to listen to your experience. So there's a lot to be said for having those conversations.
Okay, now let's shift to work-life balance. Um, Ultimately, you just have to find what's a good fit for you. Some examples are taking breaks, in the sense of getting up and walking around for a minute, but also taking breaks from your most difficult task and maybe working on something that recharges your reserves a little bit. Still something productive, but something maybe more of a fun task that still needs to be done, but good to toggle between. Also, setting realistic goals. Planning your priorities is very important. Learning where your boundaries are, what to take upon for yourself, and maybe where to draw the line and what might be an overburdening.
We'll make it a word right now, Nick. Everyone has heard it here. Overburdenment. It has been coined, if it is not already a word. So
Okay,
you're good.
we'll have conflict about that word later. Also, taking an occasional mental health day off from work can work wonders, and we could all really use one every now and again, and should, destigmatize taking such days as well.
Mhm.
Um, Collaborating with teammates so that everyone has at least one backup person is critical, because one thing I can't stand, and this hasn't been an issue in my current job, but it has in previous jobs for myself or certain teammates, was wanting to go on vacation, but feeling like nobody else on the team could, keep the wheel turning for whatever I was doing until I got back.
Mhm.
So backups, super important. And generally just, try to work to live, not the other way around. Try to, treat your break time as sacred. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, people might have to schedule something during your break, but try to block it off on your calendar and treat that as a rare last resort kind of situation. Um, Recharge time is important. And
Mhm.
ultimately, if you're not happy with your current job, uh, you should be okay with looking for a new one. There are definitely personal benefits to leaving a job, such as generally that might find you a better salary, but also it gives you something new and exciting to do, and also and can get you out of a rut too, as was the case for me when I joined Bethany's team.
Yeah. I did come for Nick as soon as we had a job. I was like, "Nick, we have a job." Because I've wanted to work with Nick for years, and also I hoped it would be a good fit for him, primarily because it's remote work, and I knew the team would be really supportive and would like Nick a lot, which they did. I mean, I think right after Nick interviewed, everyone's like, "Nick is great. Did you know Nick is great?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I've known him for years, but I'm glad you think so too." So yeah, Nick was quickly welcomed by the team. So there's a lot to be said to finding a job that meets your needs when it comes to being able to take time off and take those breaks and have a manageable workload, and not necessarily can find a job that's perfect and checks every box, but it helps to find something that is, good for you.
Yeah. Um, Inclusive communication. So we definitely wanted to talk about this. In our writing, we should consider what language might be inclusive versus non-inclusive. We should also think about our word choices, both verbal and written, and how those can affect other people's mental health. Um, Thoughtfulness in our documentation is important, but also in other forms of communication, our emails, our IMs, our verbal conversations. Um, Words, and I think this is something I can't stress enough, have power, and it's important to know the power of your words, because a word is not just a word is a choice and an action, and they can have profound impact on the way people feel. Um, when you're in doubt about something, you could always just play it safe, or you could ask for a second opinion if you have, a trusted colleague or friend, depending on the context. And you can lead by example in your workplace. If you're doing the right thing on all this stuff, or making a concerted effort to anyway, then people will follow suit on that generally.
Yeah, I want to say that Nick is excellent at this. I've often come to Nick to be sort of I guess I'll say a sensitivity reader and someone to give feedback on tone, especially for emails. Not that I'm going to volunteer Nick for work, but he's an excellent person to go to if you have questions, because Nick is very empathetic and is great at looking at any sort of piece of documentation or content from another perspective. So it helps to have someone like that, you can go to, who can give you perspective if you're like me and might um, excel at being direct, but maybe are not as naturally inclined to think about necessarily every implication of everything you write. So I'm trying to get better, and Nick is helping me.
Thanks. And even I go to others sometimes. I think I've probably even got you, Bethany. With when I'm in doubt, for if I'm, say, writing an email on something that's a little, maybe a tense situation, and want to make sure that I'm not coming across the wrong way. So everyone can use a sounding board.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for inclusive communication, we have some do's and don'ts. Do use language that affirms everyone's mind and body. Do use terms such as OCD, ADD, bipolar, only in reference to the psychiatric conditions. Um, do Ask and apologize to an individual if you're not sure, whether perhaps language you've used might have been harmful or hurtful to them in some way. Um, and when you're confronted with language that someone else uses that's not inclusive, one helpful thing you could do is respond by reframing the intended message. So, someone says something and you're like, "Oh, so what you're saying is," and
Mhm.
um, that's a way to move past whatever the offending language might have been, but also to acknowledge in a way the situation, and just diffuse it as well. um Things not to do, don't use ableist language, any language that implies there's an ideal mind or body, even when referring to a person. For example, dummy data, you could just say placeholder data. Don't underplay the impact of mental disabilities. For example, OCD is not a shorthand for perfectionism, which, in the past, before I was diagnosed, I think even I probably used that way.
Yeah, I think it's really normal. And we don't mean to say that if you have done any of these things, I think almost all of these things I have struggled with at different points. Nick and I have had many conversations about our quest to be better about the language we use. I want to say a special thanks to Julia for being awesome at reminding me about things and holding me accountable. So another reason it's good to have people you can trust in your life who will give you feedback and say, "Hey, I know what you're trying to say. However, maybe you want to say something a little differently."
Yeah, exactly. And don't use derogatory terms that have mental health implications. And I definitely, see this one really commonly and catch myself doing it too, using crazy in reference to like that's crazy, but also you don't want to use it in terms of referring to someone else. Certainly.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Um,
it's when Nick and I are we're retraining ourselves and each other on not saying crazy, and it's a journey. We're getting better.
yeah, it's really popular in the streaming community too to say, "Wow, that's crazy" or "That's insane." So it's a work in progress societally too. Um, let's see. Taking care of your
Oh,
oh
it's me. Sorry, I was reading Julia's message in the chat. She know that ADD was recategorized as a particular type of ADHD. So thank you for the reminder on that, Julia.
oh
Um,
yeah. Thank you, Julia. And I guess I actually did have a few more things I wanted to say on the previous slide. Now that I'm checking my notes, these things do take time. Ultimately, it's about intent. So don't expect to be perfect, but just do be willing to apologize if you make an honest mistake.
mhm.
Um, if you unintentionally say something hurtful, don't call out the person who's feeling hurt. Don't call them too sensitive or say that they're misunderstanding you. Odds are it's not just a joke to them. And your response to others, when they do react to something you've said, that's really what matters most. That and intent. You just want to be someone others can trust.
All right. Now on to taking care of your health. Nick and I were talking about this. We put to be mindful of your diet, exercise, and sleep. My number one thing is sleep. If I do not sleep, I am a worse version of myself in every way. I know it makes my mental health worse. It makes my physical health worse. So making sure that I am planning and executing good, high quality sleep as much as I can is something that keeps me in the best health I can be. And Nick, you said exercise for you is really key.
Yeah. It's great stress relief, especially on those days where I'm just really I have a lot of energy or I'm just really stressed out.
Yeah. And of course, I know it's easy to say, get good sleep, eat healthy, and exercise, and then your life will be better. Especially in the pandemic. I know that is not an easy thing necessarily for many people to execute. For me, when it comes to sleep, I try to have really good sleep hygiene, which is a fun phrase. Just about making sure I'm curating a specific routine to ensure that I am prepared for sleep, which means things like not being on my phone right before bed and not getting caught up in tasks or watching TV that's going to, disrupt that pattern that I need to get into good proper sleep. So, I put actually like reminders on my phone so that it will like dim my screen when it's time for me to get ready for bed and turn off my notifications. There's some good apps on your phone for like I think there's a digital well-being app that's on Android phones. I'm sorry I can't speak to iPhones. I know nothing of iPhones, but Sometimes, our technology can help us or hinder us when it comes to taking care of ourselves. I wanted to mention prioritizing caring for your own health. So many of us are caring for other people and our jobs or school and everything. And it's so easy to put your own health on the back burner, whether that's just because it's not bad enough, which is a one I know I'll say my husband struggles with particularly. He's comfortable with a high degree of personal suffering before seeking help. By upbringing, but it's something he's gotten better about. And it's important to not wait for major problems with your health or with your mental health before you tend to your own needs. It's sort of like on airplanes, when they say you got to secure your own oxygen mask first. It's important to make sure that you are, taking care of yourself as you can. I know it's easier to say than to do, and not everyone will have the same access to healthcare in this country, unfortunately. So I'm of course saying that I hope this is something that everyone will be able to do. So seek care for yourself when you can, if you're feeling poorly mentally or physically. And I hope everyone is well right now and will continue to be well, but just putting it out there to not let some of those things linger, because I know that can be really easy to do with everything else that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, in terms of working from home too, that's been so helpful for the exercise piece, being
Mhm.
able to take my lunch break and just go on a walk.
Yeah. Now being stuck at a desk in an office building, many floors up where you're like stairs or elevator, you know?
Yeah, and in work shoes that wouldn't be comfortable to jog in.
Oh yeah. I remember a time when I wore heels to work. It feels like someone else's memories inside my head now. It seems like I'm remembering something from 40 years ago that was about five. Many things have changed since working from home for the better. I wear much more comfortable shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So do I.
When it comes to documentation, it can be really easy when, especially as people whose primary skill is documentation and communication, to focus so much on the work we are doing and delivering for other teams and end users and other people that we don't tend to the documentation, the templates, and things we are using to do our own jobs. This is something I've tried to be better at as I've been longer, especially in the same job, thinking about what procedures am I using to do my work? What templates am I using? And to take the time to actually update and maintain those documents and set aside time for them, because um, maybe some people can keep track of all these things in their head. I follow a really complex process for my work, and I do have to refer to my own documentation regularly and use templates for many of the things I do. So it can be easy, especially if you've been doing something for a while, to build up inefficiencies or, take on a lot of things mentally that you need to remember to do. Um, Kelly Schrank, who's an STC member, did a really good presentation on checklists for editing. I could find a link for that and share if anyone else was interested, that I found really helpful on just taking the time to document what you do and how you do it, not just for backups or for training, but for yourself as well. Um, so the last one I put is check in on your style guide, because this is something we're doing right now. So, your style guide is your reference document that you follow to keep your documentation consistent in style and in tone. Um, it sounds like something that is fun to do if you are a grammar nerd. I say that not as a derogatory thing, but it's something I am proud to be. I care intensely about word choice, and I enjoy debating, as we talked about in the conflict slide. But there's a lot of problems that this can help solve, whether you're on a small team like ours, or a large team, or even if you're a solo writer. There's a lot of things that we have to keep in our heads. Our brains are full of grammar and syntax rules already. Don't try to add on to that. How exactly do we format that product name? Is it all caps? Is it not all caps for products you don't do often, or for specific terms? Drop down. Do we hyphenate drop down? Is it a drop down list? Is it a drop down box? Is it a drop down menu? Um, you could select one of the style guides that's out there already. We use Microsoft Manual of Style. So our team style guide covers either places where we don't follow Microsoft Manual of Style, or things that guide doesn't cover that we need, like specific information for our products. So as we take on more documentation for different products and different teams, it helps get us have a reference to follow for how we need to write, what we need to write, who we're writing for, and just have that all as reference material. It also means you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel if you have things already set up. We're lucky to use Madcap Flare for a lot of our documentation. So we have a style sheet that defines how everything looks and feels in the documentation. You don't have to remember what H2s, what your heading twos look like, or what a table of contents should be designed like. That's already all set up in the templates. And that took a lot of work that we did last year to make sure not only were we structuring and designing content in a way that was useful for our end users, but also met all of our marketing and branding guidelines. Got to have the exact right color of blue, which we're now quite, well, I don't know what the writers, we enjoy seeing other people fail to use the exact right shade of blue because we're so used to seeing it now. So you can see when it's slightly different. And then we just take great pride in having put in the exact proper hex code into our style sheet. That's the kind of that's the kind of people we are.
Yep.
So it's easy for me to say, just update everything and keep it up to date. This is what I do. I don't feel like I have to do it all at once because if I did, it would never get done. Instead, I keep a OneNote where I make notes. When I notice something, hey, I was just thinking, I don't think we have any discussion in our style guide about whether or not or when we use the word icon versus button, because sometimes it might be a little ambiguous. I'm going to put a note down and then we have a future team discussion. I'll bring it up and we can make a decision and update the guide. So keeping notes is really useful. Also, I recommend actually setting aside time when you have collected notes or it's been a couple of quarters since the last time you reviewed it, and get together with your team and review what you have put together and then see if you need to make template updates or republish the style guide. I also think it's kind of fun. I'll be honest. I enjoy this kind of work. It's like the fun part of being in TechCom. So I think it's a good project to pursue. Even if you end up doing it for yourself, you will get fewer opinions if it is only yourself and your own second opinion, but it's still work that's worth doing. It's also, if you're lucky, a good portfolio item if you have a job where you would get to keep such a document later for the future.
Plus, it's good for taking credit on your annual reviews.
Mm-hmm. You're like, not only do I meet my deadlines, look at this additional amazing resource I'm helping produce.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a little bit about managing projects. We wanted to mention mindfulness. I think Nick brought it up earlier, and as a way to deal with stress. It's basically a way of assessing your own thoughts. I often say to myself, I am not my thoughts because I do have thoughts that come into my head that I need to think through and to kind of be able to take a step back and sort of observe, label, and like analyze my thoughts. All of the things we already do with our writing and our editing are things you could basically apply to your own thoughts and take a step back. So it's really useful for avoiding self-criticism and judgment and helping you sort of manage and process your emotions. So we do have a link in our references slide to some mindfulness exercises that I recommend you do. It's nothing intense. A lot of it's just ways to sort of take a step back and, think about your own thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two schools of thought on mindfulness too. There's the kind of hyper intense, well, hyper focused side of it, and then there's like just focusing on sensory detail, and it kind of actually empties your head for a short time, which I don't get many experiences where my head is empty, so I enjoy that.
Yeah, Nick and I have talked about that. My husband, I remember, just mentioned one time, he's like, yeah, sometimes where your mind's just sort of empty. And I was like, no. And he's like, we're just like, it's just maybe a thought drifts in and out, but otherwise it's just sort of peaceful. I was like, no, what is that like? I don't understand that at all. My mind is always full of thoughts. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm pretty sure my mind is full of thoughts. So it's definitely something some of us are better at than others. I still struggle.
Yeah, yeah. For me, if it's the third Tuesday of the month and I'm on a once in a lifetime vacation and I'm on a hammock and it's 72 degrees outside, I think I might be able to achieve that state.
If you have the right beverage and snack, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm definitely a Pepsi person, not a Coke person. So
Yet we are still friends. It's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
that's true. You always have Coca-Cola.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah, I am desperately disappointed when I've ordered a Coke and they say, "Is Pepsi okay?" And I'm like, "No, it's a different drink. Why would I want that?" Tell me more about your Sierra Mist. These are the things that used to happen when I went to restaurants. But anyways, back to sort of managing projects. It is important. Nick had mentioned giving yourself time to recharge. I think many of the people here who do a lot of volunteering or are very active with families and, handle other sorts of like community engagement, a lot of us are very busy. And it's really easy to continue to commit to many, many things that people ask us to do because we enjoy helping people and we like being part of different activities, and to completely burn ourselves out. We've seen it happen with some of our most talented chapter members, and it's something I'm always trying to be mindful of, and to do better about making sure that I take a step back when I need to, and that I encourage others to do so as well. It's so much easier to see when you are burned out after it has happened, but I'd say it's something you do learn over time to get better at seeing the signs in yourself for when you just simply have too much on your plate for yourself to handle mentally, emotionally, or physically. When I mentioned prioritizing, for me, it is really easy to get caught up in things that feel or are very urgent that then take up much of my time and my energy, instead of necessarily prioritizing the things that are important. I think this is something that has come to the forefront with a lot of people in the pandemic, where we've seen a shift in how we spend our time and what we value doing. So whether that's hobbies, relationships, doing those important things like diet, exercise, and sleep, um, I handle this through scheduling. I like to have my life scheduled as much as I can, but also know that sometimes I might have to step back from a commitment. Or Julia is always so nice to me when I just say, "Hey, I am not up for meeting tonight. I am so burnt out. I have been reviewing documents for 7 hours today." And Julia is always very nice to me about it and very understanding because she's a good person. So it's important to just continue to sort of think about how you were spending your time. And we put on here minimize multitasking. This is I said do as I say, not as I do, as someone who is driven to multitask. I think we are encouraged to do so. I think we are rewarded for doing so. But often it can be extremely mentally straining, both in our personal lives and at work, to be constantly bouncing from task to task to task to task. That's something Nick and I've talked about that we both feel we're good at, I think. um, handling a lot and having a very full plate, but it can be very, very hard on your poor brain to never get to really complete anything.
Yeah, and that is a corporate societal issue that one is expected, I think, in most roles to multitask a lot. So just
Mhm.
trying to minimize it where you can. You probably won't be able to eliminate it,
No.
but doing what you can is helpful.
Yeah, and when it comes to your documentation, managing your projects, if you are lucky, you might have a company that has good project management software or some sort of system for tracking your milestones, for your projects. On our team, we have a tech writer who's been working on release notes for our product for almost 18 years before she retires this year. And she has been using a spreadsheet, just an Excel spreadsheet that she uses for tracking her work. It is simple and straightforward, and it has worked for her for all of these years. So it does not need to be a cool tool with all the bells and whistles, as long as you are taking detail into account when planning, and then also tracking as you execute, and then using that information to improve going forward. So seeing, what has worked and not worked on previous projects, and having your own little sort of I guess review of something can be incredibly useful. I also put on here to not get overwhelmed by large projects. In my role, I do have lots of small things that I do, all of that multitasking I mentioned, but my primary responsibility is publishing release documentation to our website, which I do primarily 3 times a year for 3 major releases. So my work has a very long lead time and is extremely significant, and I'm entirely responsible for executing it. So for me, I make sure I create lots of plans to work on specific parts of the work and have deadlines within, my plan for the project, and do not think, well, I'm sure it'll all come together right before the release. There's so many different things that have to be done. So being able to sort of approach it one step at a time and have my own tracking that I am holding myself accountable to manage my own time is really important. And this last one is on here because it's another thing that Nick and I have both talked about struggling with, which is to avoid the temptation to produce something perfect. To know when something is good enough is really important when meeting deadlines. I would love to think we all could live in a perfect world where we made the most beautiful, perfect documents and our emails were exemplary all the time. But that is not possible, and that is not a fair standard to hold yourself to at all times. So knowing when you're meeting your requirements is important.
Yeah. Otherwise, see burnout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Refer back to the first column.
Um, so knowing your value means a lot of different things. It means valuing yourself, knowing the value of the documentation that you produce or edit, or both. Taking stock of your achievements, both personally and professionally. Um, Tracking your accomplishments for use during annual reviews, which for those who haven't been in a corporate position yet, such as students or recent students, it's basically just a lot of companies will have a tracking tool where you uh, write what your goals are for the year and what you've done throughout the year to achieve them. So it's good to just go into that tool once every little while, maybe even once a week or so. um, do as I say, not as I
Yeah,
do on
I was
that,
gonna
but
say good for you, Nick. I'm like monthly.
you do monthly. Anyway, um, or if you're more low key, you can just open up a notepad every day and write some stuff down and have a folder of notes somewhere. Not quite as optimal, but there are multiple solutions. Um, Enjoy opportunities to be creative. That's important, because there's lots of room for creativity in the workplace. Bethany was talking about some of the more fun parts of tech comm, and there's plenty of outlets for creativity that can also be productive.
Mhm.
um, Conquer fears about offering up new ideas. So even if something's been done a certain way for years and years and years and decades, and they have stories about that, there could still be an opportunity to improve, because a lot of times, if you ask someone why something's being done a certain way, they'll just tell you, "Oh, it's just always been done that way," and then
Mhm.
you know that maybe the thread has been lost on the original intent, or maybe the intent is outdated and could use some revisiting.
Yeah.
Um, And oh, yeah. Also, keep track of competitors' listed salaries and payments, their job sites in comparison to the current compensation that you are offered. Because as I mentioned, sometimes switching a job means pay increase. STC has a salary database that they run once, or more recently every 2 years because of the pandemic. So either annually or once every 2 years. And there's just some great resources about different job titles and what they make on various metrics like median, um, and nationally and also statewide. Um, did you have anything else to add on the salary database, Bethany?
No, I think I just want to mention that that's a resource that's available to any STC member. So we'll have a link we'll share to that just in case it's not something you've seen before. So you can reference that at any point. And sometimes it's just good to have, as especially when you're new, as just sort of a standard for like, okay, here's what an average position would be in the state of Florida, because of course it does vary by state. Now, I know there's some challenges of working remote and how companies pay you depending on where you live that prevents some challenges, but I still think it's really useful data if you don't have that, if you've been working a while and have your own salary as a reference point.
Yeah, definitely. And finally, part three, closing thoughts.
So we wanted to mention on this slide a few of our key takeaways from things we've shared. I won't read off every single item for you because it's things you've heard before in the presentation. We just generally wanted to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us and to share some things in the chat about what you all have experienced, and to just continue to be mindful about how mental health is something that we all, I think, have different journeys with as we go through life. And just to think about how, as technical communicators, we are, I think, are uniquely empowered to help sort of care for people who read our documentation and our communications, to be mindful of how it will impact them, and to provide useful information to people. So please make sure you think about what you're doing when you're on the job. And in general, we hope that this is something you guys will see as a positive and useful message as you go forward. and to know that we don't have to be perfect. It's something Nick and I talked about a lot.
Mhm.
Not to hold ourselves unreasonable standards. So thank you all for being part of that so far.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I won't read all these off either, but we did want to list some resources that are available to you. One thing worth noting is in the United States and most likely, several other countries as well, depending on your situation, there might be workplace accommodations available to you for certain conditions. So that's worth looking into if you think, workplace accommodations might suit you and your situation.
Mhm.
Um, We also have upcoming events listed on this slide. May was actually Mental Health Awareness Month, which kind of inspired us to make this presentation. But there are, as you can see, events kind of throughout the year. So, feel free to consider looking at the NAMI website or Googling some of these events in, for instance, July, September, and October to learn more.
All right, and there's just our slide with our references. We are planning to send out these slides to you as attendees, so you'll have the links to everything that we referred to included there. I try to put some links in the chat, but we'll include anything else. But we wanted to just, in the end here, thank you for coming. We hope you learned something useful that you could take away about taking care of yourself and your mental health and your documentation. And I believe we've got some time here for questions. I saw the chat was very active, especially when I said combat instead of conflict. So thank you all.
Bethany, are you going to turn the recording off for people's
I was going to
questions?
say, I didn't know if there were any questions or anything anyone want to say on the recording, but otherwise I can stop it. That way we can have anything you guys want to share would just be with this group and wouldn't be
Okay, well,
included. So
if
I'll go ahead.
anybody wants to share something on the recording, that's fine. I want to share something, but I prefer the recording be off. So
Okay.
if anybody wants to go before me, please go ahead.
Yeah. Any questions anyone wants to share recording?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Where can I access this recording? Because I would love to rewatch it and just like soak in everything that I might have
Oh,
missed.
sure. Yeah. I'm about to say, it looks like Julia's grabbing a link. She's really good at this. I see
Oh.
her gesturing. So it will be posted on the chapter's YouTube account. And I think
Oh,
we
okay.
also have that on our meeting pages. I would say it's going to be up tomorrow, but since I'm the person who's going to do it, and tomorrow I am helping prepare for my brother's wedding, it will not be tomorrow, but I hope I'll try to get it up soon so that you can have access to it.
No rush. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you for grabbing that link, Julia. So that's where it'll be available.
And thank you. It's really flattering to know someone would want to, rewatch our presentation. That's very validating.
Yeah. Hear us more than once.
Absolutely.
All right. I just want to give a last call and then otherwise I will stop the recording.
I just want to say thank you, Bethany and Nick, for this presentation and for being so vulnerable and giving this presentation. Like it takes a lot of courage to come out and say, I'm struggling with this and that. And yeah, just thank you guys for your vulnerability and your courage.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
I only had the courage to do this because Nick was here with me and Nick was asked, can we do a presentation on mental health? And I'm really grateful to Nick for encouraging me to do this with him.
And I'm grateful to you, Bethany, for agreeing to, because I would not have had the courage to do this alone.
Teamwork is a key part of it.
Yeah, this is Jessica. I just wanted to echo that. From the second I saw the email, I was impressed at your courage, and now having sat through it, I'm even more so. So yeah, it was really brave to even take it on, and you did a great job.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I guess I have to agree. Am I on? Other-
Yep, we hear you.
I didn't light up on my screen. I was surprised. No, I have a nephew who's schizophrenic, and my sister-in-law for many, many years has given presentations through the NAMI organization in the Midwest. And so I'm very appreciative of the recognition of the thoughts that you've had. And actually, it strikes me that the role of technical communicator is probably one of the most mental health stressing ones. When you think about the fact that no matter what we do, organizationally, we're outnumbered and we're outgunned. Those of you who know Dan Voss know that he has some quirks, but he and I both at Lockheed work proposals for 3 to 4 decades.
Mhm.
And it's like, no matter what, you can't keep everybody happy. You're outnumbered 100 to 1 in terms of engineers versus communicators. It comes down to the time that they've all frittered it away. You still have management that wants to look at it one more time. You're mentally counting off the steps that you can throw out and still
Mhm.
meet the deadline. And to go through that, to climb that mountain and go through that gauntlet, if you will, over and over and over again, takes a certain strength of self to be able to pull that off. And perhaps if we had been wiser and more aware
As a collective.
that our self-image and mental reserves occasionally needed topping up, it probably would have made it better than it was. There were some very, very difficult days in those jobs. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, WC, and especially about your family. I know we all know people who have had varying degrees of different struggles. So and it's great to know that there are organizations and resources out there. And I think Nick and I tried overall to focus on the positive and things we can do proactively to care for our mental health. But what you say is very real. It is not. I'm not going to say, and now everything is different, and the workplace is wonderful, and everyone treats you with kindness at all
You know, I
times.
was afraid it would be.
Uh, but
Fun fact, I started at what was before Lockheed Martin Marietta 50 years ago this month.
oh wow, I didn't know it was. Well,
Um,
congrats.
Big milestone.
A lot
Awesome.
of pain already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say that a lot of those pressures, and especially I think with a lot of teams like ours, our work comes at the end of a long and difficult process. So often we can be left holding the bag for mistakes that are made further upstream. That's really where I think some of the conflict comes in, is when people are looking to assign blame.
Plus you feel the responsibility because you are carrying the whole team's work to present forward to a customer.
Right.
You
We're the
don't-
advocates.
You don't
for them.
dare. You don't dare step back from your very best under all circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's when Nick and I were putting together this presentation. That's why we really want to focus it on the relationship building and the team side of things, because for both of us, knowing that we do have people that are in our corner and do support us and see the value is important. I would love to say that we could evangelize to every single person at every company about TechCom. Maybe someone will have an idea how to do that better than me. But the least we can do is make sure that we do have support where we can, because you're right that we will not have that from everyone.
Yeah, I would say the chief mental health, just a thought came to me and I thought, wow, I actually verbalized that well in my head. So I'm going to share it with people.
Please
I just thought the chief challenge is to learn how to value yourself when you're often in an organization that doesn't value you. And in an organization, valuing you is your work. I mean, because it's not as though we all connect with each other. People like, I value you for you. It's your work. But if you're how you value your work, and how I know I have to do that process where I say, I'm really proud of X, even if it's only an Oxford comma or or something, because I know it's not something that is
Right.
you're not going to get that external validation that you might hope for, especially if you're a lone writer. I know lone writers struggle with this all the time because you don't have anyone to bounce it off of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that that is a unique struggle. And I appreciate a lot that you shared about that experience over the years, and how you've dealt with that, because I know it's not easy, and it never ends, right? There's always more work to be done and more opportunities to hopefully encourage yourself. Nick and I
I will
talked a
say,
lot about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. I had this thought too, and I will share something as well, because thank you for acknowledging that. One of the challenges I find in interacting in groups like this is when I hear these things, I think I'm not doing that, and that makes me feel like I'm not doing a good job. But I know I'm not doing that because I'm a lone writer. Like I know I've tried it, and I know that in my context, I trial and error, what's going to work, what's going to fail. What is going to get me in deeper trouble, picking your battles basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's something that it is interesting. So and then that's another way where I say, no, I'm not doing that. That's a practice I should be doing. But I also know that how that goes over like a lead balloon and has come back around to make it worse for me.
Right. Yeah. And
It
certainly
shouldn't.
we
It
don't want to
shouldn't, but it
we
does.
don't want to feel like anything is one size fits all. We know everything is contextual.
Oh,
and
yeah, no,
based
no,
on-
it's just, it's the lone rider's plight.
yeah, I know. I know. You have a unique struggle and I'm really sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's something, it's unique, but when you go to a conference, I was just, there's so many lone riders there and I'm like, that's why we're there. Because it's where we finally get to talk to other tech riders and why we're here.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for offering that perspective. We're definitely, both. We probably needed that to round us out since we're both on the same team together. So it's nice to have, a lone rider's point of view also on this recording.
Yeah. Well, I don't see anyone else who's unmuted, so I think I might go ahead and stop the recording and then we'll have a chance to hear from Lori. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to stop the recording, and then for the next few minutes we can speak openly with the group.
Thanks, everyone.